Hi, this is Lee Vermondelli, and welcome back to the Kill Luck universe and the commentaries I do that explain my thoughts creating the first series as well as this new sequel, the Artisan Wraith. So first I want to say thank you so much to everyone who read the first series, and a big welcome to all the new people who might be finding it for the first time. It really means a lot that you would take time to check out this little science fiction story that's near and dear to my heart. So today I'm just going to be talking through kind of the origins of the sequel and then running through issue 1 of the Artisan Wraith, which is a new 7-issue series coming from IDW. And yeah, so to get into things, the first series of 6 issues was always designed with, I would love for it to continue on, but if it didn't, that I hoped that it had kind of a satisfying ending that worked for a self-contained story, but also one that made you want a little bit more, if hopefully you like the world and the characters. And so I knew from the beginning if there was a sequel that it would be called The Artisan Wraith. That was a title that I liked. I thought it had a real kind of ominous connotation if you followed the events of the first series. I'm going to speak openly on this commentary, presuming you've read the first series. I would highly recommend that you do before you read the sequel. But if you just read this first issue, hopefully you enjoyed it for what it is. So the cover here, I knew I wanted something that I definitely wanted the Artisan Wraith himself in the background as sort of the looming threat at the start of the series. And then the introduction of new characters, 2 really important characters that are in the front here. And then even in front of them, I wanted to keep the idea of the kill lock involved, specifically, like the actual punishment of it, because it was important to me that punishment be front and center still in this world. At one point I debated, what if the sequel is an entirely new batch of 4 characters dealing with their own problems? I think the kill lock concept lends itself to kind of a Twilight Zone aspect of each series could just be someone else's crazy time dealing with this. And that is something that I think I will do down the line, is kind of an anthology series about other characters dealing with it. And we see some in this issue of people who have dealt with it as well. But for the sequel, I really wanted to follow the characters from the first series. I really was invested in them, and I hope the audience kind of wanted to see more of them as well. But getting things here, the interior credit page here. I wrote and illustrated this story. Sean Lee did the lettering, did a great job. Really enjoyed working with him. David Marriott has been a longtime editor, friend of mine on Transformers. Always great to have his eyes on this story too, because it's like when you write and draw something, you're really in kind of a void. You're sort of like, I really could use someone else to kind of just every once in a while catch something or ask me a question like, does the story make sense? This kind of thing. And now get to page 1 of the actual story here. I wanted it to follow the structure of the first series, where we started with a wide shot and then we panned in closer to a location. Follows the exact same page layout of when we first met the Artisan in the first series. A couple Easter eggs here in the background of the first panel. You can see one of the giant kind of tooth, horn remains of one of the bone, creatures left behind, which is kind of, I want to further push this idea that there was organic life at one point, and then that's kind of been wiped out, and there's machine life now. This little structure here is meant to be kind of you can rent it for an hour, weekly thing. The notion that people kind of down on their luck, really, this is the type of neighborhood you're in. People do kind of some shady business in there. And then the last panel here on the left side, you can see a Wraithius symbol, which is the symbol that the Wraith and his people really hated and had a lot of deep-seated feelings towards. And that's a symbol to get explored more in this series. This next page here is the introduction of one of the new important characters here. I wanted to do this kind of ticking clock countdown, like a really quick sequence of basically this character has 5 minutes to really do this really dangerous, painful procedure, or she's going to die. And so she's enlisted this stranger who I think is in tradition of kind of the Kill Luck universe of poor robots that just happen to see something horrific for 5 minutes and is going to scar them for the rest of their lives, like these hapless characters that are roaming the worlds out there. And then page 3 here, we're jumping now to the present, and we see that this character, who is called the Resolve, and I'll get into a little bit more of that, has survived basically the kill lock detonating. So she's sort of been able to switch out her internal parts, survive the procedure, and now many years later is working as a member of this class called the Resolve class, which is an elite squad of robots or class of robots that is sent to take care of really dangerous situations. So in the first series, there's a cameo by a Resolve member that's refers to herself as a hunter, but really it's a Resolve class that goes up to the Artisan when they're on like the party planet. That's kind of a hint of, I always knew the sequel, if I got to make it, would deal with this kind of robot of like who actually goes out and cleans up some of the messes out there, which the Artisan Wraith really represents. This big splash here is the two main characters of the sequel, at least as it begins, revealed. So we have the Resolve and the Lurk. Now, the story itself in this issue will explain this, but basically they're members of the same class. They are both Resolve class, but for a couple reasons, I decided to differentiate them. One, because I thought I made much more clear to the audience that he would be referred to as the Lurk and she's the Resolve. And then also, I thought it gave some depth to him, that, you know, his condition, as you'll see at the end of the story here, it leads to this sort of memory deterioration. And so that condition caused him to just decide he wants a new name and would like to be known as this, and which she's happy to do. Like, I wanted these two also to show over the course of this issue that they really care about each other. They've been working together for a long time. They sort of bicker and argue, but you can see some real love between them, I hope. So in the background here of the splash page, you can see there's two chairs facing the ocean. So I always like, or facing this lake. So I always like to suggest an environment of like, okay, at night, you know, they hang out there and they watch the sunset and stuff. I like to show a bit of their home life when they're not wreaking havoc, which is what they're about to do here. This next page is in there really just to kind of fill in anyone who didn't read the first series and kind of summarize what happened. So it's, you know, it explains roughly what an Artisan class is, what the Wraith Legion is, and then also saying for people who did read the first series, you know, where is the Artisan Wraith now? And it's confirmed here that he left the planet. So he took their ship from the last series and went off-world. And then basically the page after will show that he basically sent out a signal that was summoning all other Killock sentencees to live under his protection on this planet. I wanted to show just how dangerous the Artisan Wraith is immediately, where he has the power not only physically, but also intellectually, and he knows how the systems of the homeworld and the Forgers operate, so he can send out a call on a frequency so quickly changing that they can't block it. And then the world goes dark, so they have no idea what's going on there. And then it's up to the Resolve class to get sent in. So I wanted this issue primarily to focus on the two new characters. I wanted you to hopefully emotionally invest in them, because you know, if you've read the first series, what they're up against. And so I was hoping that if you liked them, that you would kind of worry a bit about them, because you know that they're going up against something that's, you know, pretty dangerous. This next page here, we're basically are driving through like a bad part of town, and then the Lurk confronts this guy. I had to solve visually, you know, what exactly would show this random citizen that he's a Resolve member, because it's not like he has a badge like a police officer. And also, by definition, one thing I wanted with the Resolve is that they look different. Every single one looks different from each other. So that's why they're kind of scary. Is they're more like an undercover cop. You don't know if you're talking to one. But for this story, he had to kind of show some visual idea. So I thought, what about like a stylized R, like a light that he can show from his palm? And that's like a pretty scary symbol if you're an innocent person, because you know the Resolve class sort of operates with complete authority of the Forgers, meaning they have a license to kill. They're kind of like a secret agent, or they can level buildings in broad daylight, and there's no, you know, all like repercussions for them. This next page is then basically entering this black market weapons dealership. I knew I wanted this first issue to feel like visiting kind of the underbelly of the universe. We saw a bit of that in the first series, like Rakkus, which was kind of the party planet, but this is kind of the dangerous arms dealers and the world that the Resolve class operate in. I was really excited to get to do the sequel to kind of expand out more classes of robots and how their civilization works. This notion that things we didn't see in the first series are active out there. There was a Resolve class operating, and we only saw like a glimpse of one. And then they approach this character that they know is kind of a documentarian who has recorded in places that are really hard to get to, and they have information that basically he has footage of the Wraith Legion, which is, to understand how to take out a Wraith physically, they need to study footage, which is hard to find because most people that are around a Wraith, it's not a great situation, or they don't survive it. But I wanted to get across this moment here where the Resolve kind of calmly starts to crush his hand, that there's a lot of strength in this character's physical shell. Like we saw at the beginning how much damage she took. And now, you know, I wanted that kind of physical threat to be prevalent. This next page where they're confronted by other people in this bar, I wanted it to show this sort of tension that exists in the first series as well, that all the robots are sort of living under the rulership of the forgers and their really harsh rules and laws. And that's something that not only is the Artisan Wraith looking to undo in this sequel, but even the Resolve class, who are operating at this point under what the forgers want, they're also still suffering from the resentment of even being associated with the forgers. This idea of a ruling class that really subjugates everyone underneath it is something that I liked from the first series and wanted to explore more here, where that's going to be a gigantic theme of this sequel, and hopefully some surprising ways. With this fight scene here on the next page, so the Lurk is revealed to be a cloaker here. So the notion is that he's a kind of a prototype class of robot where they have really cool cloaking ability, really effective cloaking ability, but over time their memory starts to fade, and that's why he's not quite at the top of his game anymore. And the Resolve is like frustrated with him and how he acts, and he forgets things or he doesn't take things seriously. And I wanted this page here where he's cloaking and wreaking havoc to be all she's doing is watching him, because she knows that no weapon in the building is actually a threat to her. So she just kind of stands there and she takes being shot at and having like a pipe broken over her head. And she's watching the Lurk, even though he's invisible. She knows to watch the signs that he's going to have this kind of an episode. And she knows it's coming because he's deteriorated over time. And that's what happens here, where basically he has this kind of, he forgets where they are, that he remembered they were at home, which is what she was afraid of. She sort of warns him in the car, like, hey, you're going to have to do this a little bit, but just please, like, conserve. Because I want to get across this idea, too, that if you're a cloaker, it's really fun to be a cloaker. It's a really cool skill. It's a really enjoyable skill to have. So it's alluring to want to use it, even if it's causing you, like a lot of sort of addictions. It's really enjoyable, but it'll cause some real downsides later. But this last panel here where she rushes toward him and kind of rips the table out of the ground is another kind of indicator of how strong she is. Like, I wanted to show that more than her just punching someone, where hopefully other kind of more subtle ways to show it. And then the next page is them being shot at, and I wanted this touching moment. This moment actually happened later in this series, but I wanted to move it right up front because I thought it really showed, one thing I was really concerned with the Resolve was I wanted her to have dimension in this first issue. I didn't want her to just be super strong and just be bullets bounce off. I wanted there to be some heart. There's things that she worries about. So physically, there's nothing in the room that she's worried about, but she's worried about the Lurk and she's worried about what's going to happen to him. And then I wanted this reveal where her arm snaps open and really the weapons are inside of her, kind of like the Wraith, where it doesn't really carry a gun. It's more like internally, is in the Wraith's case, it's more like internal strength and archaic kind of gladiatorial weapons. Her, it's strength, but also really high-tech kind of weapons, like really advanced sort of like Bond-ish gadgets inside. And so she annihilates the room full of people and then leaves. And I always like the notion in both series where whenever something catastrophic has happened, that there's a couple witnesses left around. So this next page where they're walking out in the fire, the red fire, the labor class, there's one in the foreground who's alive. So he's going to tell a story of, man, you do not want to mess with Resolve classes, how bad they are. And I like that that's very intentionally done by them, where it's like kind of like a Batman notion. We're going to let you spread the rumors of how dangerous we are because you're helping us that way. And then this next page, I wanted it to be kind of like any couples or any people that spend too much time together, where the Lurk says, you're mad at me. I always know when you're mad at me. That's something where, if you've been around someone a lot, immediately something's wrong and why they're upset and that kind of thing. And I hope some of the heart came through here as well, where, it was important to me in the first series too, that because they're robots, they wouldn't have a lot of heart to them. I think it was really important to me that they show they care about each other. And then even though her face is essentially masked through the entire issue, aside from the beginning, that you sort of understand what she's going through and what she's feeling. And then this next page here is like, I debated if this was too much exposition, but I felt it was kind of necessary. And the fact that it's a diary entry or a private log, I thought gave it a little bit more leeway. But basically her summing up what the situation is, for not only their past, but the Lurk's past and also the future, where she's determined to cure the Lurk's memory negation or memory deterioration. But in the meantime, they have this problem to go after, which is a huge problem, which is the Artisan Wraith. And then this epilogue here on planet Nalavast is where the Artisan Wraith has chose to settle. So this is his colony of, murderers and criminals. This castle on the next page is another example of the architecture kind of from the first series, where if you see, it's sort of like a spine bone snake of another of the giant ancient creatures, and then there's a metal kind of castle built into it. This notion of using existing bone and rock and mixing it with metal, I think, is something that I really like exploring, like even in the real world, like recycled or buildings that are used for a new purpose. Like the city I live in, Los Angeles, there's a power plant here that was turned into a nightclub. There's like a bank that got turned into a restaurant, but they kept the existing architecture, and I love that kind of thing. I think it suggests a real sense of history. And I wanted the final words here to be sort of the Artisan Wraith talking not just to the moon, but also to the reader. So the final line of "It's wonderful to see you again," like that's definitely meant to be a nod to kind of returning readers, but also just kind of welcoming you on the ride. So hopefully, even if you haven't read the first series, you have a sense of how dangerous the Artisan Wraith is, and then also you're hopefully a little invested, maybe worried about the resolve and the lurk and what they're going to go through here. And that's it for issue 1. This is a preview page here. This is the cover of issue 2, which is, intentionally not a big spoiler image. It's the Artisan Wraith punching through a wall, but I will say there is action with the Artisan Wraith next issue. And then there's a little afterward here, just my thoughts on making the series. And again, thank you so much to everyone who read the first one and is joining me on the adventure on the second one here. The first pinup of the sequel series is by Don, my great friend from high school, which is a beautiful, beautiful piece here. I love the colors. Composition's great. Don's done some amazing work. He's currently doing Spawn covers for Todd McFarlane, just doing a great job here. Next one here is by my buddy Carlos. Carlos Diana. We worked together at Wildstorm under Jim Lee, and I love this piece too. It's so cool. Carlos is like a really gifted artist in a lot of ways, but his robotics and his sense of really making things work and look like they fit together, like really cool here. And it's just really cool, as it was on the first series, to see other artists interpret these characters. I feel like it really builds out the world, and I love the different interpretations. I always tell anyone who's working on a pinup, like, do whatever you want. Make it as different as you want. Like, as long as you can tell it's roughly the same characters, like do whatever. And thank you so much for joining me on this, for reading the book and for listening to the commentary here. And I will see you soon for issue 2. Thank you.